Who likes tax collectors? None of us do. We all hate to pay taxes, and there's no way around it. However, taxes are needed. They are needed for civil projects, for safety and security in our communities, and for all the other things that make our community work. So, in a sense, tax collectors are needed to get that tax. And there's a famous tax collector that we meet in the Gospels, and that was Matthew. Matthew was kind of a quirky kind of a guy, I guess, because in his day, even though he was Jewish, he was willing, because he was greedy, to work for the Romans. And as we know, the Romans were hated because they occupied the territory around Jerusalem and in its environment. And so tax collectors were not very popular people, never mind having one of them being a tax collector. As far as we know, Matthew came from a wealthy family, had a good life, was well educated, but that sense of getting money took over his life. And so he gave up his values to become a tax collector. And as the story goes, one day Jesus was coming into town and he saw over in the distance a tax collector's booth. And sitting in that booth was no other than Matthew. Yes, Matthew. Now, whether Matthew knew anything about Jesus, had ever heard about him, or anything else, we don't know. But we do know that when Jesus walked by that tax collector's booth, he looked into the window of that booth and saw Matthew, not as a tax collector, but rather as a collector of souls. So he says to Matthew, "Come, follow me." Now, what does Matthew do? He's shocked to think that this man even would address him. Never mind want him to follow him. But what does Matthew do? Somehow at this one moment, he has the greatest conversion of his life. He doesn't think about his wealth. He doesn't think about his education. He doesn't think about any of those things that he had as a pleasure. He was converted at that moment because when he looked into the eyes of Jesus, Jesus saw not a sinner, but someone to love. And Matthew immediately gets converted, leaves his money bags and his treasure, walks out of the booth, and follows Jesus. And we know the rest of the story. Matthew goes on and, in a sense, becomes the archivist of Jesus's 3 years of travel because he wrote down all the things that Jesus did on his trips. And so we have a gospel of Matthew, thanks to him. Now, we have the same problem with us. Sometime in our life, Jesus will walk past us. And he will say to you, "Come, follow me." And what will you do? Will you leave behind your past, your environment, everything you knew to follow a stranger? Yes, what would you do? Well, if we look into the eyes of that stranger and see the love that he has for us, we couldn't do anything else but leave everything behind and follow him. So when you get that call, when you see Jesus asking you to come follow him, will you